there was an amazing thing that was like 2 days after, I think 2 days after season 4 came out, and I was walking on my street in North London, and this guy who I pass all the time, like going to going to the little coffee shop at the end of the road, or going to the shops, whatever. I always see him. I've never spoken to him, not a single word. And he walked past me, and just completely out of the blue, just goes, bows his head and goes, "Your Royal Highness," and I was like, that's so weird. This is so much fun. So obviously, probably the last time I saw you actually was on Emma, which we did together.
I know.
Which is weird because it feels like, obviously that was a long time ago, but we chat. The most active I am on any WhatsApp group is on the Emma WhatsApp group.
I mean, it's wild to think about Emma because, I mean, obviously the entire world's just changed so drastically since then. So Emma's kind of the last, happy pre-pandemic experience, I guess, that we all really had. Because by the time I got to playing Beth in the Queen's Gambit, I was so tired. It was amazing, but I was exhausted after a while.
Queen's Gambit was my favourite television show throughout lockdown, and I'm completely obsessed. I told you that. I did text you, I completely loved it. I guess we'll touch on this probably. It's the sort of thing we should touch on. Variety actors on actors, but the stamina you have to have for a television series is so much. How do you not you look so fresh and under control and nailing it.
Oh, thank you.
How are you not exhausted?
Thank you. Honestly, I started going to bed at 8 p.m. I became a grandma, and I was very content about it because there were maybe 4 straight weeks where I had 4 a.m. pickups every single day, and I just started going to bed at 7:30, and it was wonderful. Do you know what it is? I think, and I'm sure that you agree with this, there are certain characters that just carry you through a job.
Yeah.
It's just almost a compulsion to tell this story where you wake up in the morning and you think, what on earth am I doing with my life? Why am I awake at this time? I'm so tired, I can't possibly create sentences for myself. But there's something about the character that just makes you want to get up, and you feel like you're doing something vital, which sounds ridiculous, obviously, considering the time that we're living in. But yeah, I think it was the character, but also the people around. On Emma, everybody there, there were definitely days where I just felt so tired, but every new person that came in was such a breath of fresh air, and you guys were so supportive. You were a nightmare on Emma because you were the only person I could not stop laughing.
You really couldn't handle me.
You made me feel so unprofessional. I couldn't. But from the moment I met you, I was like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare. He's going to make me look so bad. Because it was just so brilliant to watch you. And actually, wait, okay, it's my turn to fangirl, please.
Great.
No, you're just going to have to listen to me giving you tons of compliments. But my favorite thing about watching you perform is, there are a couple of things. One, you inhabit characters so effortlessly. It's like you just sink into them, and your cell membrane just touches whatever it is that person is. You really exude the energy of that person. And everything you do is believable. It's astonishing. I was just rewatching The Crown because I loved it the first time I saw it, but now really just keying into your performance, everything you do is believable, and everything you do is completely natural.
You're the best.
No, I mean it.
I always find it incredibly fortunate, and not to because obviously I want to talk more about Queen's Gambit, but in terms of Emma, because we're both on that. Autumn de Wilde, who directed the film, I'm not telling you that, I'm telling the wider world. She posted something yesterday, actually, on Instagram, which is a picture of the scene in the carriage, which is the first day of Emma. And you and I kind of came in this studio, and we're in this tiny carriage, and people were rocking it. And we had to do this incredibly kind of quite a dark scene. It's it's
but
sort
also
of funny,
a pivotal scene.
And a very pivotal scene. And and I was super nervous and was already a big fan of yours. And I got the same thing with you. It's I think it would have been very easy to play that, the Emma role in a slightly broad way, but everything was so specific and you were so sat in it. It was just such a treat to start that film, you and me just kind of ripping into each other. It was great.
There's no way to describe what having a meaningful partnership with the person that you're acting opposite with, like what that gives to you, what that gives to a performance, what that gives to you as a person. Because I remember on Emma having a couple of moments where I was like, Josh, I don't think I can do this. It's all too heavy and I can't.
You run that show, but you've got this kind of great support network around you. But I think what's so amazing and has been amazing about The Crown is you're constantly surrounded by these kind of like big hitters like Olivia Colman and Tobias Menzies and Helena Bonham Carter, and they're all sort of like, their tools are sharpened, they've been knocking around for a while, they know exactly what to do and how to play it, and they have the same insecurities we all have, but there's that support system of like, well, I've been here before, and how did I deal with it before, and all those moments where you have to unpick things, and so I think because of that, and I had the extreme benefit of having like 2 or 3 episodes in season 3 to kind of get to know everyone, and I knew Olivia Colman a little bit before, and so it's kind of, that was okay. Emma just like came into this show. I think she'd done like one other job, and she walked into this role, which is such a kind of huge role for many reasons. It's got all this kind of
incredible
power,
but terrifying.
totally terrifying. She was the kind of the beginning of fame and celebrity as we know it now, and so I was all kind of prepped for like, I'm going to be the most supportive actor that this actor's ever worked with, and I'm going to be there for her, and if she ever needs advice, I'll be there. Like week 2, I was going to her for advice. I was like, I'm stressing out, I'm panicking, I don't know what I'm doing. She was very original and lots of fun.
And for you?
Oh, he was simply marvellous.
I do think that there is something about being supportive and being open, and partly it's because you just want to be nice and you want people to like report back to other people and say, oh, he was nice to work with. But also, I just think, like, selfishly, you benefit from the other person opposite you being the best version of themselves. And I think if you can kind of make someone feel like they're going to smash this and what they're doing is brilliant, and like if you go to them and say, right, let's take this to the next level, then they'll match you and they'll go there. So with Queen's Gambit, what was that company like? Because it was such an incredible sort of group of actors.
It was,
it must have been a
being
dream.
completely honest. Yeah, I was running a marathon at the pace of a sprint 3 times. So by the time I got to Beth, I mean, I think I got really, really sick at the beginning of the job, which I tend to try not to do because, as you know, when you're sick, you just keep working. So it's like, ugh. That group of people was one of those beautiful, serendipitous blessings that you get on jobs sometimes, where every person that was supposed to be there was there, and we were all just intrinsic parts of a puzzle, all working towards the same vision. And it was strange how we all did have the same picture in our mind. Like we were all just making the same show with very little discussion about it, and that felt very important and supportive. But also, I didn't have any, and this is a question I want to ask you, because my relationship with my characters, they're all very varied, but they're very intense and they are incredibly real for me. And by the time I got to Beth, I had no energy to put a boundary up between myself and the character. And so I would wake up in the morning and go, oh, I feel awful. What is this feeling? And then realize, oh, it's her. And you're just going to be in this for the next 18 hours, essentially. And that was wonderful because it meant I was never reaching for any emotion. I've never had a performance before where there was just no trying. It was there. But it was complicated separating my emotions and realizing what was me and what wasn't.
There's so much darkness and sadness with Beth that when I watched it, I remember saying, with me and my partner watching it, and I remember saying to her, I was like, oh, I really hope Anya's okay. Because that's like, you were like living it. And I really felt, I think everyone kind of unanimously, when we watched that show, felt this kind of like, she goes through it.
A janitor taught you how to play? Really?
When I was 8.
I imagine. It must have been such a distraction from life in such a depressing place. I mean, you must have been very lonely.
I'm fine being alone.
I'm curious, A, what your relationship to characters is like in general, but B, what it's like when it's a real person. because I've never had to really do that with somebody who's alive.
There's a sacrifice that I sometimes think you have to make when you start a job.
Yeah.
I don't know if sacrifice is the right word. Maybe that's a bit over dramatic, but there's something about like, and Prince Charles is a tricky one because in some ways he's a real he is a real person. Yeah. But in some ways, I think because of that, you have to like part ways with the real version of him in order to kind of capture something unique or different. But I just think there's the sacrifice you sometimes have to make is this piece of yourself. And I remember thinking when lockdown happened, oh, this will be great because it will stop us all from working. I mean, like, obviously it wasn't great, but in a way I was like, oh, maybe this is going to give us a bit of air to go like, and what do I like doing? Because I think we do spend a lot of time like, and it's beautiful, and that's why so many actors are so kind and their mental health is so healthy, is because we're constantly being empathetic.
Putting ourselves in other people's shoes,
Yeah, totally. But then at the expense sometimes of like, well, who am I? I know it sounds a little bit over the top, but I do think it's a thing.
I knew I was going to have to play Emma and then my character in Edgar's movie before I got to Beth. And honestly, that was potentially the hardest thing about the job, was keeping Beth at bay and going, I cannot even think about that yet. I know that I will get there. I know that I have to do that. But first I have to give these other people that I really care about my attention and time and love and brain, essentially. But by the time I was finished with Beth, I was done. Like, it was a good space for us to part ways. I will always keep her with me because I've never given so much of myself to a character before. It's such a weird thing to do because I usually think about characters as so different from me, and I make it a real point to make them walk differently, to have a different caliber of voice, to laugh differently, to cry differently. I want them to be their own person. But for Beth, it was the first time that I just thought the only way to tell this accurately is to give bits of myself up. And that can be, that's kind of strange now, because I'll be sitting at a restaurant and I'll hear someone say like, oh, she like holds her face the way that Beth does. And I'm like, oh gosh.
No.
Beth, what?
Towns, the guy you're playing now, is underrated. He plays first board for the university team, and last month he came in 5th in Las Vegas.
What's in Las Vegas?
Do you have a thing you do when you finish a job?
I cry on planes.
No, Anya,
I cry hysterically on planes. No, but it's good. It's good crying. My first heartbreak was not a relationship. My first heartbreak was finishing my first job and experiencing that loss of there was a world that existed with a group of people that became my everything for a period of time, and now it's over. And I had no concept as to how to deal with that. And discovering that characters were real for me really helped with that, because at the time I remember thinking, I'm going to have lunch with everybody today. Like, I'm going to see them. What is it that I'm missing? And I realized I was missing Thomason. I was missing the character. I desperately wanted her back. And I think having that knowledge really helps with releasing characters. And then, I think getting to spend 7 episodes with Beth was good. Any less would have been, I would have felt cheated, or I would have felt like I didn't spend the time with her to make sure that she was okay. I sound mental, but I know that you understand what I mean.
No, I totally
I sound
get
completely mental.
Honestly, someone asked me recently about a character I played years ago, and they were like, do you ever think about how they are? And it's like slightly caught me off guard, because the interview, it was like during the madness of like a press junket. And I was a bit like, I think in my head, I was just like, first of all, that's a really like kind of meta crazy question to ask me. And I think I gave an answer like, oh no, I don't. I just like finish the job and then I'll go on to the next one. But then I thought about it and I was like, I definitely do it. And it's so weird. But often I think about like the moments where I've really desperately tried to cling on to people around a particular film. And I agree. I think it's about a character. I think it's like, it's saying, you know, you live with this person, you really care about this person, and then you have to say goodbye. And I think it's I think the other thing, and what I found, again, that kind of slightly caught me off guard was like, you know, obviously, real Prince Charles, who knows what he's like, but with the character, he's kind of nasty by the end of season 4. And we had this, like, we were going around doing press, and the journalists were, like, really finding it hard to part me from Prince Charles and being like, I don't like you, you were nasty to lovely Emma Corrin. And I was like, I promise you I wasn't.
Well, A, it shows that you did an incredible performance, but B, this is such an interesting thing. And again, let's separate real Prince Charles from this situation and make it about, you know, the person that you portrayed. I find it very difficult when people say nasty things about my characters, even if they are nasty. Because it's our job to protect them and it's our job to defend them. And when you're playing them all day long, you have to be okay with their choices because you are making them. You have to justify them in your own mind. So I remember I played a sociopath, and during the whole filming, everyone would keep coming up to me saying, God, your character's horrible. And the reaction I would have is as if they were insulting my little sister or something like that. It was just like, you can't talk about her that way. You really don't understand what she's going through. And then the job ended and I was like, wait, I've been playing a horrific piece of work for months. Wow.
But I think that's a cool kind of wrapped up in the same thing, isn't it? Of just like, we sort of fall in love with them and then it's hard to say goodbye. It's hard to like see them as a viewer as opposed to like being them.
There's just something about it. I think I've always felt very scattered when I'm not acting. And strangely, on set, in front of a camera, with a character, I just feel like I really am in the right place. And that's something I really connected with Beth on. Beth did not have a way of inhabiting the world that made her feel comfortable until she found chess. And then the second she found chess, she went, oh, okay, this is it. This is what's going to allow me to be a person and allow me to have, you know, potentially a good life and be a good person at the end of the day. And I think I was so lonely as a kid and I had such a rough time in school. And I just remember holding on to this feeling of, I have a feeling that there is a place where I make sense and where I will meet people who will share my same sensitivity and my same fierceness for emotion, I guess, rather than telling me to tamp it down all the time. And the first day on set of The Witch, I just said, oh my God, I'm here. Like, it happened. It's real. It's a real place. I can do this. And then, again, that job ended, and I was like, I'm never going to work again. I was so terrible.
Was that your first job? Was The Witch your first job?
I did a 2-week movie in Bulgaria. So
pretty much,
I thought movies were made in 2 weeks. So The Witch was my first experience of marks and like real cameras and
So what was that like going from like, because I know that we've talked about it, but I also read something recently because I think have you just shot or done another film with Rob Eggers? Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd read somewhere that you were saying that it felt like coming home by like doing. Is that because it was an early job? I mean, Rob Eggers is like one of my favourite filmmakers.
He's the best.
As your first job, that must have been quite an amazing... Was it hard to then go and work with other people?
Well, I didn't understand how much of my on-set comportment came from Robert until I was back on set with him. And of course that makes sense because he was my first director. So the way that I behave on set, the way that I understand every element kind of set comes from his lens, really. And I am so grateful that my education for how to behave as an actor, how to approach characters, how to approach a job came from working with Kate Dickie, Ralph Ineson, and Robert Eggers, because nobody had a job. Everyone was working together to make the film work because it was an impossible film to make and we had no money. So it was just, I mean, the amount that I learned by virtue of not being stuck in the actor box was amazing. And I find the more jobs I do, the more fascinated I become with filmmaking in general.
How involved were you in not just in the costume stuff, but with like the whole process of Queen's Gambit?
So independently, Scott, the writer, director, producer, and Daniel Parker, the makeup artist, and I, independently, all three of us decided that she needed to have red hair. And that was cool that we would all kind of come to it together. And then Daniel and I would spend a lot of time looking at references because we were like, okay, we need to age on screen. How do we want this to work? And let's be very, very specific about it. Because what I love about filmmaking is it is a visual art. So if you're not using everything at your disposal to tell the story, even if it is subconscious for the audience, it does land. Like, you do get there. And so to answer your question about the costumes, Gabrielle Binder, the costume designer, who I love so much, just from the second we met, I think I tried on the first outfit and like my whole body language changed, and she was like, oh, okay, so we're going to try everything on and we're going to build you a wardrobe and let's discuss references. And I was like, okay, this is the first time that Beth has seen an Audrey Hepburn movie, and it's coinciding with her getting male attention for the first time. So why don't we move into this era of her? And what I really loved about that was, you know, she is trying on characters. She's trying to see who she is. And I think at the end you arrive at something with her. But everybody does that. And I do think there's an element of the reason why people have connected so much with Beth is I do think a lot of people have Beth in them. I think that sense of loneliness, that sense of trying on lots of different skins to be more acceptable in some way, or trying to fight against the demons in your own head. I think people connected with her because they got to see her grow and they got an understanding of her in that way. And I think clothes were a big part of that.
How do you keep track with such a vast... Because you basically played a whole life, which is insane.
Honestly, that's one of... Like, again... You know me, Josh. I am not an organized, like, I am a very messy, all over the place person everywhere apart from set. And on set, just from the beginning, and again, I do think it comes from Rob, I have to be, and I find it deeply satisfying to be in charge of my continuity, to know exactly where I'm at in the story, to know everybody else's continuity, to know the shot that just happened, so I know exactly the level of flush I need to have to enter into the scene. Like, that's the stuff that really gets my brain going. And there were days when we would, I mean, luckily we were using wigs because it wouldn't have been possible otherwise. But there were days when we were starting at 15, jumping to 21, and then going back to 19. And the wigs and the costumes were so helpful with that, because I had a very specific way that I wanted Beth to walk at the beginning of when I started playing her, and then arrive at a different walking journey again, like actor wank, but you know what I mean. So where do you even start with somebody like Charles?
This is supposed to be my tour. My tour as Prince of Wales to shore up one of the key countries in the Commonwealth at a very delicate moment politically, and thanks to you...
Thanks to me, people have shown up. Thanks to me, people are interested.
No, thanks to you, people are laughing in my face. Booing the heir to the throne. Booing the crown.
Oh, come on. Oh, don't do this.
Do you remember the first time that you did the voice? Were you by yourself?
Yeah.
Was it scary?
In my room, years ago. No, I actually, the voice is a kind of funny thing because I had a weird, so first of all, I had quite a weird relationship with, well, not relationship, but like a weird introduction to playing Charles, because I'd just had a really, like a pretty rubbish year, actually. I'd just done this, a film had come out, God's Own Country, which had done really, like, had lots of success in the kind of indie film world. A little film. And that kind of like had this great success. And in the same way as the kind of when The Witch came out, is that thing of like, you know, a new filmmaking voice that everyone got very excited about. And it was a breakthrough role for me. And I'd had this like crazy year. I just couldn't handle it really. I remember my hands came up with like terrible eczema, and I was like, I remember I did this like BBC adaptation of Les Miserables, and there's this really like very beautiful, or supposed to be very beautiful romantic scene where Marius like talks to Cosette, and he puts his in the script it was like he puts her hair behind her ear, and so he puts and anyway the scene's going brilliantly, and Ellie Bamber's opposite me, and it's all going fine, and then you just see this like claw come onto shot, and it was like a sort of bloodied eczema-y sort of claw, put hair behind her. And it was awful. Anyway, so the reason I say that is because that was my year. And I was like, do you know what? I was going through something. I was finding it really hard. And I get this phone call in Belgium when I'm doing Les Miserables from my agent saying they're doing another season of The Crown. The first two had come out, and I'd watched them. And Vanessa Kirby, who is a great friend of mine, I'd watched it for her, and she was amazing. And I got this phone call being like, "Will you come in for Charles?" And I was like, "No way, absolutely not." I was like, "There's not a chance." And I was expecting it in a weird way because I thought, well, I've got ears that'll play my advantage, and I had heard friends were auditioning for him, and so they called, and I just thought there's no way that I could do it. Partly because I thought, I have no interest in the royal family. I don't know anything about the royal family. I love the show, but also I just thought Claire Foy and Vanessa Kirby lived in those roles, and Matt Smith as well. Those three actors, and the rest of the cast as well. But I think Matt, Claire, and Vanessa just properly lived in them and breathed them. And for some reason, the voice sounded amazing. And loads of people talked about Claire Foy's voice in the same way as people talk about Emma's and mine and this. But what was so amazing about the way she did it was it never felt like she was doing anything. It was just she was breathing it. And so with the voice, I guess my big pressure when I eventually took the role was I was just I just need to get that voice right so that I don't have to worry about it. And I worked with this amazing dialect coach, William Conacher, who I don't know if you've come across, but he's brilliant and lovely. And we did weeks and weeks of work, and then 2 or 3 weeks of work, and then I just said, okay, now go away. I can't think about it as being a voice anymore. We talk about acting, and then we sort of qualify it and be oh god, that's such an actory thing to say. But actually I'm on this campaign and mission to embrace the work we put in and be yeah, it's great when we can't perform. But the walking for Charles, I was no, we're covering a long period of time. I'm not just going to do a funny walk and make him more and more arched over as I go through for the sake of it, just because I'm an actor. You have a reason for it. In the same way as Beth is in one place at the beginning of her life and she's in a totally different place at the end, and in between it's a roller coaster. Charles is exactly the same. So I love finding little things to help tell, visually tell the story of where the character is.
Even at the end, I find Charles incredibly sympathetic. Because you do feel for him, because you do feel for a young man desperately trying to have some kind of original life in the confines of an institution that by nature is not about originality. It is not about you living your own life. It is about living your life for duty. That is what you are there for. And so I think I still found it incredibly, sad.
There was this great thing that Peter Morgan, the writer, said to me very early on, where he was this boy, he was just try to remember that this boy shares his mother with an entire nation of people. And I was oh my God. And then he went, and this is the one that I was stab. He said, so he shares his mum with an entire nation. And then he's and also, in order for his life to start taking meaning, his mum has to die. And it's that's insane. It's a terrible affliction on some young kid. So I
That's
always
a lot. That's pretty heavy.
Yeah. So I was every time I was I'm being a bit nasty, or someone says, oh, is that a bit harsh that you're playing, the way you're playing him now? I'll be no, I don't think it is. I think he's gone through the ringer.
When I see the light in people's faces when they look at you, it makes me realise that I'm the luckiest man in the world, and we're the luckiest family in the world. Makes me want to ring the Queen back in London and say, can you hear that, Mummy? Listen to that. It's 100 decibels louder than anything you ever got. Chew on that. Choke on that.
When people come up to you, what do they tend to say? Because, of course, their relationship to Charles is potentially complicated, I think is a good word.
There was an amazing thing that was 2 days after, I think 2 days after season 4 came out, and I was walking on my street in North London, and this guy who I pass all the time, going to the little coffee shop at the end of the road, or going to the shops, whatever. I always see him. I've never spoken to him, not a single word. And he walked past me and just completely out of the blue just goes, bows his head and goes, Your Royal Highness. And I was that's so weird. so freaked out. And I think I did a sort of like, yeah, classic. And walked
I would
on.
have curtsied back. I
know.
I wouldn't know what to do. I'd just be
I
like,
think I did
yes,
like a
yes.
sort of, I did
Thank
a sort
you.
of like shake of the hand and a bow, and then realised it was like COVID, and so I was like, blah.
Oh yeah.
I want to ask about Mad Max. You're doing Mad Max, which is
Yes,
a
I
prequel,
am.
right? You're doing a prequel, playing Furiosa. Is it Furiosa?
Furiosa. Yeah, you just said it the way that my dad says it though, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, classic.
My dad gives me a lot of hell for the fact, because we speak Spanish, he calls her Furiosa, and I'm like,
Furiosa.
it's an English speaking film, but like, okay, daddy.
So what? Have you started shooting it? No.
No, so I'm in a grace period right now. I've got a grace period until August, and then I will be working back to back until mid-2023.
Oh my God.
Josh, hear me out. I've thought about this. I've realized how unhealthy I am, and the way that I'm thinking about it is I'm like, okay, if I can get into a really good routine where I exist off of something other than like Diet Coke and cigarettes, essentially, I think I can do this and be happier and do a good job of it, because all of the roles are quite physical. And I think the thing that makes me the most excited about Furiosa is, number one, George Miller. That brain is incredible, and he's so kind. I feel so lucky and so privileged to get to spend time with him and to grow alongside him, essentially, because, you know, they're mentors.
You'll probably be grand.
Thanks.
If I did 2 jobs in a row, I think I'd like collapse.
Everybody knows that you're the best person to work with and the most wonderful person to have on set and a fabulous scene partner and blah, 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 blah. Everybody knows this. But I do want to finish off by saying, and I don't know what your experience is like with this, but the joy that I amass from watching people that I love who are talented do incredible work is unparalleled.
I feel like we're very fortunate. We like end our loving now.
So there we are.
That's the end of our Actors on Actors. Hey.
Yeah, we did good.